This is not an endeavour to try and do price gouge on customers, and Foxtel has a very long and proud history of never exceeding the inflation rate in its pricing processes. This is about building the business, getting better synergies between the two companies, and really creating a kind of efficient powerhouse that can continue to invest and innovate in Australian content and in contemporary broadcast delivery for Australians.
Well, just on pricing and other issues like that, this will obviously need to get past the ACCC. Do you see any issues there, and do you expect that you would have to give some guarantee about pricing to them?
Well, this is a conditional indicative proposal which is subject to a number of clearance issues, both in terms of Austar itself and the due consideration by Austar's board, independent experts report for Austar's board, and regulatory clearances by the ACCC, the Foreign Investment Review Board, and so on. We would expect that the ACCC will give very close consideration to the matter, that it will conduct market inquiries. We're very confident as to the quality of the representations that we will make to the ACCC, and I think it's important to remember that Foxtel does not currently compete with Austar in any part of Australia other than the Gold Coast, which represents about 2% of the Australian market. So I think it would be unusual for this arrangement to fail on the basis of a very modest contested portion of the market in Australia, where there's rough pricing and packaging parity in any case.
OK, well, let's talk about the Gold Coast, because you mentioned it. Austar does have quite a big operation on the Gold Coast. Can you make any guarantees to the people, I suppose, that work there, that their jobs are safe?
We're particularly eager to retain the Robina Gold Coast facility. It's a terrific contemporary customer service centre, and we'll be retaining the Gold Coast facility at Robina and retaining the jobs at the Gold Coast facility.
Now, Austar shareholders, the indicative price is $1.52 a share. That's around a 50% premium to where the price was trading before the market really started getting a whiff that these negotiations were underway. You see that price as fair. It's a bit of a trade-off because there will be a lot of synergies, a lot of savings made by combining the two operators. Can you give us some more detail on those synergies and what they're worth?
Well, the multiple is in fact about a 54% premium on price pre the media speculation that started around February the 18th. In terms of the value of the bid, it represents an enterprise value for Austar of about $2.46 billion. The combined revenues of the company will probably amount to around $2.8 billion annually. And in terms of the multiple on enterprise value to earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortisation, after synergies, it's probably to the order of about 8.1%. We see it as being a very fair and full price. We've been very careful to actually manage pricing in a way that actually properly reflects on an international and domestic benchmark. And we're confident that we can extract synergies from the arrangement to the order of between $60 and $70 million annually.
Apart from the speculation that's led to this most recent deal, I mean, talk of this has been around for 6-7 years of a merger between the two companies. It's always reportedly been stymied by some of the major shareholders, including Telstra, Consolidated Media, News Limited. What happened during this set of negotiations?
I couldn't possibly comment on that, of course.
Was there a turning point that got everybody across the line? Look,
I think Foxtel is a company that benefits from having 3 substantial shareholders that clearly are confident and strong companies. They're companies that have dedicated interest and commitment to media enterprise, and I'm very pleased to say that they've all arrived at a harmonious and unanimous agreement. And we are united as one in seeking to improve the lot for Australian consumers. And this is really very much about improving the quality of the services that we offer to Australian consumers and our capacity to continue to invest and innovate.
Kim Williams there speaking just after that proposal to purchase Austar was announced to the market. Let's move on now, though, and have a quick whip around some of the other news in the media sector this week. Fairfax journalists took to the streets on Thursday morning protesting what budget cuts, which they say will undermine the quality of the group's papers.
I'm a business journalist and I'm under no illusions about the challenges facing Fairfax financially. And look, we have moved a long way in what we're prepared to do with management, but it's just that management seem to be pushing the cost-cutting piano note every single time.
Stuart Washington there from the SMH. Now, James, this was initially going to be a flash mob, I believe, but it was more just a bunch of journos collecting signatures for a petition against further job cuts at the SMH and at Fairfax.
Yeah, well, they seem to be, I think they're going about it the right way, just trying to raise awareness. They don't want to disadvantage the customers of the newspaper. There's been no industrial action as such yet, you know, no strikes, so stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes, given that the decision seems to have been made.
Now, there's also a bit of a war of words going on in the Herald Sun and the Age over the future of the Fairfax Melbourne Daily.
Yeah, it sort of came to a head, if you like, last week. Jeff Kennett rated virtually 2 pages of the newspaper devoted to why he thought the Age had sort of lost its way. He thought eventually it would become a one newspaper town. Jeff Kennett, of course, got a long history. Back when he was Premier, he had some pretty big run-ins with the Age at a time when Bruce Guthrie was there. As the editor, Guthrie subsequently moved to News Limited. We know what happened there. He fell out there as well. So he had a bit of a dig there. Then Paul Ramage sort of wrote a lengthy editorial the following day on Saturday explaining, well, look, the Age isn't going anywhere. If you look at the figures, and he trotted them all out, our audience is actually increasing both in online and in print. So.
Okay, let's move, you mentioned online there, let's move into that space because Jo Pollard has announced she's standing down as the head of 9 MSN. This will be just another issue, I suppose, for David Gyngell to worry about. Yeah,
indeed. He's got a few things on his plate, hasn't he? Yeah, she's been there for 3 years. I guess that coincides with the contract end. She wants to spend a bit of time with her family and they're out recruiting and a replacement.
And still on 9, David Gyngell's been out sort of telling media buyers what's ahead for the next 6 months because it hasn't been a great sort of start to the year for 9.
Yeah, pretty slow start to the year. They've sort of finally come out and acknowledged that to the market. Somebody said he was out apologising. I'm not sure if it was actually, he put it in those terms. He was out highlighting some of the new content they've got coming up. We've talked about some of those things. Hamish and Andy, of course, The Block coming in along. I think June 20 is the start date, is a 7 p.m. weeknight offering, and of course a full Underbelly series later in the year.
And there was a highlight this week, which was the State of Origin. The figure's pretty good for that on Wednesday night.
Yeah, did big business for 9. They had their best night of the year on Wednesday this week. I think it was about 2.2 in metro markets watched the game, another 1.2, 1.3, a total of 3.5 million, 4 million peak audience.
Is that enough to win a week, one night like that?
In the old days it used to be, but no. Because 9's been a fair way behind, it won't win them the week this week. Well, it doesn't look like it anyway. Okay.
We had on back on Monday, the Oz, I think, published a full list of what are called Q scores, which scores basically as to how the public sees personalities and whether they should watch them, whether they don't care if they're on, whether they don't want to watch them, whether they like them or dislike them. There was a lot of kind of kerfuffle about the numbers actually coming out, but you're saying this research is not new?
No, it's over a year old. In fact, the Q scores aren't actually undertaken anymore. There was a research tool developed by David Castron, who we had as a guest on the show once, and he talked us all through it and gave us a bit of an insight into how it works. But the networks were sort of torn. Some actually liked it, some thought it was a bit overvalued, and so he sort of discontinued for the time being. And the numbers we saw this week was a fascinating insight into seeing, you know, how the stars are rated and the audience perceptions, but it is well over a year old.
Okay. Channel 10, Network 10, we've got the first, on Wednesday night, the first of Oprah's final shows was aired. How are we looking for ratings?
Did pretty well, about 1 million people. Was up against some pretty tough competition, MasterChef, the State of Origin, yeah. So it's interesting to see how that's the first of 3. Big news about how she's disappearing, but she won't be off our screens altogether. Of course, she's got her own network now in the US, so they've got tons of Oprah programming. Either she'll be on camera or her sort of associates and colleague of, you know, best buddy Gail's got her own show, and that's a JV with Discovery, and they're not ready to roll that out internationally yet, so we won't see it here for a while.
Okay, just quickly, something we won't be seeing a lot of in the future is Spicks and Specs. They're pulling the plug on that one. Yeah,
the ABC announced this week the show's finishes in November, so still a fair bit to go. It's been a staple Wednesday nights at 8:30. Numbers down a little bit this year, so I think that would have been part of their decision, but not solely their motivation for doing it, I don't think.
And 2 big Australian stars in the States, Rachel Griffiths, so first of all Brothers and Sisters was axed, and now Toni Collette, United States of Tara, is going.
Yeah, so we've just gone through the process. The networks are sort of cleaning out, if you like, some of the shows that have been around for a while, maybe not performing up to expectation. Both those shows have had better years, so they thought, okay, make way for some of the new programs coming through, which we'll start to hear a lot about in the next few weeks and months.
Okay, and I just quickly want to touch on radio in the FM space, because this week we've had Nova sending some of its presenters around the world on the Amazing Race, and also Kyle and Jackie O getting Lindsay Lohan on board.
Yeah, it was an interesting way that you've got to think global these days to make a bit of an impact. So yeah, Nova, Fitzy and Whipper had a week in Bangkok, and they got a lot of interesting editorial out on their drive show. A tie-in with Sydney Breakfast. Merrick Watts raced a listener to see who could get the furthest away from their Piermont studios. The listener actually won, did very well. And Kyle and Jackie O had quite a sort of, they called it a world first, got Lindsay Lohan to co-host one of their mornings.
Lilo in the morning, all right. We need to take a break, but coming up on Media Week, from the mean streets to Cloud Street, we've got Screen Time's Des Monaghan in the studio. He's the man behind both those series. We've got plenty more as well, and we'll be talking Australian content with him in just a moment. Stay with us.